Apple describes the MacBook Air as the most popular Mac. Let's go ahead and review the brand new 2018 model. Welcome everyone, it is Andrew here from Apple Insider. After quite a dry spell, we finally saw an update to the popular laptop. Apple gave this thing a thorough overhaul, updating the outside, the display, the internals, and of course the I/O. Pretty much everything you'd want to see in an upgrade. The MacBook Air sits in a very specific spot in Apple's portable lineup. You got the 12-inch Retina MacBook below it, then the MacBook Air coming in with a 13.3-inch display, then you have the 13-inch MacBook Pro and the 15-inch MacBook Pro. There are compromises in any which way you go, whether you opt for the cheaper MacBook where you lose screen and a lot of performance, or you go to the 13-inch MacBook Pro which costs a little bit more money and you don't get as much portability. It should come as no surprise that the new MacBook Air relies on USB-C. You've got a lengthy USB-C cable included in the box, as well as the power adapter. USB-C is becoming more ubiquitous, with more and more devices adding support, including the new iPad Pro. Also included with that cable is the actual power brick itself, which is wrapped in somewhat of a paper material rather than the normal plastic, and it's a little bit more tedious to actually remove. Instead of the normal 29-watt adapter that Apple normally would ship, with devices of this size, Apple has included a 30-watt adapter, so just a tick up a little bit faster. You can see that spec a little bit if we zoom in on the actual side of this thing. 30-watt adapter for the new MacBook Air. We've also got the usual getting started guides, introducing everyone to USB-C if they weren't familiar with it, the fact that you can plug in a monitor, you can use either spot for actually powering the machine, and all the other benefits that go along with it. We also have the usual Apple stickers, but instead of the matte white ones, exclusive to the new 2018 MacBook Air, we have color-matched Apple stickers. That's right, if you get the space gray MacBook Air like we did, your stickers will be space gray. If you opt for the silver model, they'll be silver, and if you get gold, they'll be gold stickers. So it's a nice little touch to go with Apple's new color schemes on the Air. Looking at the setup process, there's just a couple things I want to touch on. First, even though we have a beautiful new Retina display, it doesn't support True Tone, so you're not going to see that option during the boot process, similar to how we did on the new MacBook Pros. We do, though, have support for, I won't say the words, but invoking Siri using your voice. The setup process walks you through that, including registering your voice with your machine. It's really handy for looking up things like folders and documents, though there are certain limitations. That's more of a problem with macOS in general rather than Siri itself. We also see the first inclusion of Touch ID on the MacBook Air, though it doesn't come with a touch bar, so there's still a normal row of function keys with the Touch ID sensor there on the far right. It can be really handy in a number of situations. We found it to be very fast and a great way to unlock your machine. However, for us, the best way to unlock our machines is still just using our Apple Watch. When we're close, opens up, unlocks your machine. There are other positives to Touch ID though, because it can access a lot of other stuff on your machine, like accessing notes or your passwords inside of Safari. So there's still benefits to Touch ID even if you don't use it to unlock your computer. One of the most important aspects to the MacBook Air is going to be that keyboard. This is kind of like the ultimate student computer, so being able to type on it reliably is incredibly important. Apple included a 3rd generation butterfly keyboard, and it works really well. Of course, the key movement is not huge, but it feels a lot more solid. I'm comparing it to my 2016 MacBook Pro, and there's quite a substantial difference. It feels more solid, more reliable, and a little bit more of a clacking feel when I'm actually typing on it. I really enjoy typing on this keyboard, though there are definitely going to be those that still hate Apple's shallow key movement. As a journalist, I do a lot of writing, and now that I've been used to Apple's keyboards, this has been my favorite one to date. Just feels so comfortable, reliable to type on, and it's not too loud. It's definitely quieter than my 2016 MacBook Pro, though it's pretty much on par with the latest version of that MacBook Pro. I know a lot of people use the speakers on their laptops, so I really wanted to see how well the new speakers performed. And there's not a lot of difference. You can see the ports on the either side of the keyboard where the actual sound comes out from, and it sounds okay. Not great, but not terrible by any means. Sounds pretty solid and gets fairly loud, but it lacks a lot of the bass that we see with Apple's more pro-level machines. There's simply more room in like the 15-inch MacBook Pro that you're going to get a lot more bass. There's not a ton of bass here, so if you really care about your music, use AirPlay or a headphone jack and plug in some better speakers. Speaking of which, Let's go ahead and take a look at the ports. On the right hand side, we have a headphone jack, all by its lonesome. On the left hand side of the machine, we have two Thunderbolt 3 ports. That's right, these are actual Thunderbolt 3 ports and not USB-C. That's a big difference between the 12-inch Retina MacBook and the 13-inch MacBook Air. There's so much more you can do with Thunderbolt 3 that you can't do with USB-C. For instance, with this being Apple's kind of entry-level laptop, there's definitely going to be areas of performance that could do a bit better, especially compared to the Pro machines. And the biggest one for us was graphics. If you're using this for watching videos, creating some presentations, and some writing and taking notes, you're not going to have any problems. But if you want to boost up some performance, you can connect external accessories like a Thunderbolt 3 solid-state drive or an external GPU. That gives you a bit of modularity. You can pick up this lower-end machine and connect these external peripherals. Of course, that boosts up the price a little bit, but you have a more portable machine and you can connect those when you need them. Aside from the decent speakers, Touch ID, and the improved keyboard, we also have an over 20% larger trackpad. They've also got rid of that springboard design that we saw before, switching to the new ones that provide haptic feedback no matter where you press down on the trackpad itself. It makes a big difference when you're using a lot of gestures. It's still not as large as like the 15-inch MacBook Pro, that's humongous, but it is an improvement over the previous MacBook Air. One of our favorite features of the new MacBook Air is the display. It is a gorgeous Retina display. Even though it doesn't support True Tone, it still supports the P3 wide color gamut. Comparing it to the newer MacBook Pro 13-inch, it looks really unchanged. It's a great display. Though we did notice that it isn't quite as bright, and turns out the max brightness is 300 nits compared to the MacBook Pros, which can get up to 500 nits in brightness. Shouldn't be an issue inside, but if you're using this outside, you may notice it. As we noted before, the biggest limitation on the new MacBook Air is going to be the graphics. Even as we went to go run the Cinebench R15, we had that spinning pinwheel just for a few moments before the test even kicked off. The new MacBook Air ships with Intel UHD Graphics 617. With that, you can support one external 5K display or two 4K displays. We ran our machine through the Cinebench R15 test, both the OpenGL and the CPU tests. We ran both tests many times, and they all seem to hover around very similar values, with the OpenGL averaging around that 31 FPS point and the CPU test just above 220. We then moved on to Geekbench 4. We averaged 4,362 and 7,858 on our single core and multi-core test respectively. Those are some decent results for this low power 7-watt Amber Lake Intel chipset, though not hugely elevated over the 2017 MacBook Air with the 1.8 GHz Broadwell Intel chip, which earned a single core of 3335 and a multi-core score of 6119. It also clocks in a bit above the Core M chip found inside the 2017 12-inch Retina MacBook. That 1.4 GHz Retina MacBook earned 3925 and 7567 on their single and multi-core tests. This is a decently good sign. As in previous MacBook Airs, Apple used 15-watt Intel chips, which required more than twice the amount of power and ran much hotter than this year's 7-watt. There was some warranted concern on how well it would perform, but it does appear to be showing some improvements even with that reduced power consumption. And even with less power, Apple did include a single fan to help that processor cool. We did notice that fan kick on just a few times during our testing, and when it was fully ramped up, it could be a little loud. We were hoping for a fanless design, but we're sure Apple did it this way for a reason. Stay tuned for more thermal testing to see how that actually pans out. Apple made great strides with the MacBook Air this year, and it's probably the best machine for a lot of people. If you want to pick one up for yourself, even with that higher price tag, you can find the best prices at our price guide down below in the description.
If you enjoyed this video, like it and hit that subscribe button. Also, check out our price guide, which makes it extremely easy to find the best deals on Apple products updated daily. Be sure to follow us on social media, and we'll see you in the next video.